A poor mother gives her daughter an empty gift box, but a billionaire sees it and does something incredible. The park was crowded that Saturday afternoon. The spring sun fell warmly on the wooden benches, illuminating the trees that swayed gently in the wind. Children ran around the fountain. Vendors offered popcorn and cotton candy, and couples walked hand in hand along the stone paths. Julian Hart crossed the park with quick steps, a leather briefcase in his right hand, a cell phone in his left. Impeccable navy blue suit, gleaming shoes, upright posture. He had just left one meeting and was already late for another. Another Saturday at work, another day just like the others. He barely paid attention to his surroundings. The park was just a convenient shortcut between his office and the parking garage. The people around him were just moving blurs, distant noises that didn't reach him. But then something made him stop. On the other side of the park, near an old sad worn-out bench, a blonde woman was kneeling before a little girl. The girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Golden hair fell in messy curls over her shoulders, and her blue eyes shone with a pure, almost magical expectation. The woman, thin in simple, clean clothes, was holding a small box wrapped in gift paper. The paper was wrinkled, as if it had been saved and reused, but the ribbon was carefully tied on top. Crooked, but done with love. Julian stopped in his tracks. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the light hitting just right at that moment. Maybe it was the little girl's smile. Or maybe it was just his own loneliness searching for anything that seemed real. He stood there, watching. "Happy birthday, my love," the woman said, holding out the small box with both hands. The girl took the gift as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Her bright little eyes widened even more, and she shook the box near her ear, trying to guess what was inside. "What is it, Mummy?" "What is it?" "Open it and see," the mother replied, smiling. Julian took a step to the side, leaning against the trunk of a tree. He didn't want to leave yet. He couldn't explain it, but he wanted to see how this scene ended. Tessa, he didn't know her name yet, but he soon would, began to tear the paper open in a hurry. Her small hands pulled at the wrapping with excitement, tossing pieces of paper aside. Finally, she opened the lid of the box and stopped. She looked inside, turned the box from side to side, looked again. There was nothing there. "There's nothing here, Mommy." The girl's voice was quiet, confused. She didn't seem sad, just surprised. As if she was trying to understand what she had missed. The mother took a deep breath. Julian saw the weight on her shoulders, the way she tried to hide her exhaustion with a smile. But the smile came. Genuine. Despite everything. Grace held her daughter's face in both hands, gently, like someone holding something fragile and precious. "Yes, there is, sweetie. All my love is in there." Tessa blinked. She looked at the empty box again, then she looked at her mother, and then, as if something had clicked inside her, the girl smiled, a huge smile, full of teeth and light. "Then it's the best gift ever," she shouted, throwing her arms around her mother's neck. Grace closed her eyes and hugged her daughter tightly. So tightly that Julian could almost feel the squeeze from where he stood. She buried her face in the girl's golden hair and stayed like that, motionless, as if she wanted to hold on to that moment forever. Julian felt something strange in his chest, a pressure, a tightness he hadn't felt in years. He knew birthday parties. He knew halls decorated with expensive balloons, tables laden with imported sweets, gifts piled to the ceiling. He also knew the emptiness that came after, the cold silence of a large, empty house, the feeling that, despite everything, none of it mattered. But this was different. This was real. Julian looked at the briefcase in his hand, at the phone that wouldn't stop vibrating, at the suit that cost more than most people make in a month, and suddenly, it all seemed small. He crossed the park. He passed a toy stall set up near the fountain. The vendor, a middle-aged man with a grey mustache, was arranging stuffed animals hanging from hooks. "How much for that one?" Julian pointed to the largest teddy bear at the stall. It was light brown with black eyes and a red bow around its neck. The vendor told him the price. Julian took out his wallet and paid without hesitation. He picked up the bear, which was almost as big as Tessa, and walked back toward the bench. As he approached, Grace looked up. She watched him carefully. He saw the suspicion in her eyes, the way she instinctively pulled Tessa a little closer. She was used to protecting herself, used to not trusting. Julian understood. "Excuse me," he said, stopping at a respectful distance. His voice came out softer than he expected. He knelt slowly, getting down to Tessa's height. "Hi. I heard it's your birthday today." Tessa looked at the giant bear in his arms. Her blue eyes widened. "It is," she answered, excited. "Then, this is for you. Happy birthday." He held out the bear. Tessa looked at Grace, asking for silent permission. Grace hesitated. Julian saw the internal struggle playing out: pride, fear, the desire to protect her daughter, but also the desire to let her be happy. Finally, Grace nodded. Tessa took the bear with both arms and nearly fell backward from the weight. She hugged it so tightly that her face disappeared into the soft fur. "Thank you," she shouted, her voice muffled. Thank you," Julian smiled. A small but genuine smile. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled like that. Grace stood up slowly. She wiped her hands on her faded jeans and extended one to Julian. "Thank you," she said firmly. "Really, you didn't have to." Julian shook her hand. It was a calloused hand from someone who worked hard. But the grip was firm, dignified. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." They looked at each other for a moment. Julian saw tiredness in those bright eyes, but he also saw strength, a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't give up, the kind that wakes up every day and keeps going even when everything is hard. "I'm Julian." Grace. "And this is Tessa." "Hi, Julian." Tessa waved from behind the bear, only half of her face showing. Julian waved back. "Nice to meet you." There was a brief silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. "Well, I should get going," Julian said, starting to walk away. But before he left, he looked at Tessa one more time. "Take good care of him, okay?" "I will," Tessa promised. "Seriously, I'm going to name him Teddy." Julian laughed, a low, almost forgotten sound. "Teddy is a great name." He waved one last time and turned away. As he crossed the park back to his route, something inside him changed. The briefcase felt lighter, the phone less urgent, the suit less important. For the first time in years, Julian Hart didn't feel completely alone. And in that bustling park, without any of them knowing it, 3 lives had intersected. A simple gesture, an unexpected bond, the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. Julian didn't plan on returning to the park. At least that's what he told himself all week. He had too much work, important meetings, reports that needed to be reviewed. It made no sense to go out of his way just to see if 2 strangers would be there. It was irrational, unnecessary. But the following Saturday, there he was. It was almost 2 in the afternoon when Julian walked through the park's iron gate. The sun was high, the warmth was pleasant, and the place was as busy as ever. Families were having picnics. Children ran among the trees, dogs chased bulls. He scanned the area with his eyes, trying to look casual. He walked past the fountain, followed the stone path, looked at the benches, and then he saw them. On the same bench as always, Grace was sitting with a book in her lap. She wore a simple white blouse and the same faded jeans. Her blonde hair was tied in a loose ponytail. Tessa was playing on the grass beside her, with Teddy the bear sitting in front of her, like a special guest at the imaginary tea party she was serving in tiny plastic cups. Julian hesitated, stopping a few feet away. Maybe it was better to leave. Maybe they wouldn't even remember him. Maybe he was being intrusive. But before he could decide, Tessa looked up. Her blue eyes widened. "Julian!" she shouted, jumping to her feet. The little girl ran to him with her arms open, her golden curls bouncing, stumbling over her own feet. Julian instinctively crouched down, and she threw herself into a tight hug. "Hi, Tessa," he said, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "You came back," she said, holding his shoulders. "I knew you would come back. I told Mommy every day." Grace closed her book and stood up, walking toward them with calm steps. There was something in the way she moved, a natural dignity, even in simple clothes. "Hi, Julian," she said, and there was no surprise in her voice. It was as if she had been expecting him. "Hi," he replied, standing up as Tessa held his hand. "I was passing by and thought I'd say hello." Grace smiled faintly. "I'm glad. Tessa hasn't stopped talking about you all week." "It's true." Tessa pulled his hand. Come see Teddy. He's having tea with me." Julian let himself be led by the small hand to the grass. He sat down next to the bear, which was positioned with a purple cup in front of it. "Teddy, this is Julian," Tessa introduced solemnly. "Julian, this is Teddy. He's very polite and likes strawberry tea." "It's a pleasure to officially meet you, Teddy," Julian said seriously, extending his hand to the bear. "Strawberry tea is an excellent choice." Tessa laughed out loud, a crystal-clear laugh that echoed through the park. She threw herself on the ground, rolling with laughter. Grace returned to the bench but didn't pick up her book. She watched the scene with a discreet smile. Julian noticed that she never took her eyes off her daughter for long, always checking, always attentive. Tessa served imaginary tea to Julian, explaining in detail how Teddy liked 3 spoons of sugar and always asked for seconds. Julian played along with genuine attention, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. After about 20 minutes, when Tessa got distracted chasing a butterfly, Julian got up and went to the bench. Grace gestured with her head, indicating he could sit. He sat, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you," Grace said after a moment, "for coming back." "She really liked you." "I liked her too," Julian replied. "She's special." Then he added, "And you too." Grace raised an eyebrow. "You don't know me, Julian?" "No," he admitted, "but I'd like to. If you'll let me." There was a pause. Grace studied him for a moment. "Why?" she asked directly. "Why do you want to know us?" Julian thought before answering. "Because when I saw you two here last week, in that moment with the little box," he paused, "I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. I can't really explain it, but it was real. And I realized my life is full of things, but empty of moments like that." Grace nodded slowly. "And what do you do, Julian?" "Besides showing up in parks and giving away giant bears," he laughed, "I work in financial consulting, numbers, spreadsheets, meetings that solve nothing." "Sounds boring." "It is," Julian admitted. "Most of the time, it's completely boring." Grace tilted her head. "Then why do you do it?" Julian blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever asked him that. "Fine, good question," he said, laughing without humor. "I guess because it's what I've always done. It's what my father expected. It's what I know how to do. I never stopped to think about whether I liked it or not." "That's not a real answer," Grace said without judgment. "No, it's not," Julian agreed. "You're right." They sat in silence, watching Tessa play. "And you?" Julian asked. "What do you do?" "I survive," Grace answered simply. "I work wherever I can. I take care of Tessa. I do what needs to be done. It's not glamorous, but it works." "It must be hard." "It is," she said, without drama. "But we manage. Because giving up was never an option." Julian looked at her. There was a strength in those words he rarely saw. It wasn't arrogance, it was pure determination. "Have you always been alone?" he asked, and immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that's none of my business." "It's okay," Grace said. "Tessa's father left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready, my family. We haven't spoken in years, so yes. It's always been just me and her." Julian felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry, I'm not," Grace said firmly, "because I have her, and she has me, and that's enough." Julian believed her, not because it made logical sense, but because she spoke with an unshakable conviction. "Do you have family, Julian?" Grace asked. He took a moment to answer. "I have a father." "We're not close, never have been." "Why?" Julian sighed. "He never really wanted to be a father. My mother died when I was 7. Cancer. It was fast. And my father, he didn't know what to do with me. He raised me, paid for everything, put me in the best schools. But it was more out of obligation than love. He was never present. Never listened to me. Grace watched him in silence. And you grew up thinking that's how things were supposed to be, she said. And she was right. Yes, Julian admitted. I grew up thinking that was love. Providing things, fulfilling obligations, keeping a distance, not bothering anyone, not demanding attention, not expecting anything beyond the minimum. But it's not like that, Grace said quietly but firmly. No, Julian agreed. I know that now. It took me 35 years, but I get it. They fell silent again, a comfortable silence of two people who were beginning to understand each other. Can I ask you something? Julian said. So you can. Why did you accept the bear that day? You didn't know me. You could have refused. Grace smiled faintly. Because I saw your eyes that day. You weren't trying to impress anyone or feel better about yourself. You just wanted to do something good. And I've learned to recognize intentions. I had to learn. Julian nodded, touched. And now? He asked. Do you think my intentions are still good? Grace looked at him directly. I think you're looking for something, I don't know what. Maybe you don't either, but I think you're honest, and that's more than most. I am, Julian said. I don't know what I'm looking for, Grace, but being here feels right. For the first time in a long time, something feels right. Grace nodded slowly. Okay, but don't expect me to be grateful all the time, or to bow down just because you have money, and I don't. I don't work like that. Julian smiled. I wouldn't expect anything different, and I don't want anything different. Tessa ran up to them at that moment, out of breath. Mommy, can I show Julian the lake? Grace looked at Julian, asking for silent permission. Of course, he said. I'd love that. The three of them walked along the stone path to the lake. Tessa went ahead, skipping and humming, with Teddy being dragged by one arm. She's incredible, Julian said. She's everything, Grace replied, and there was so much pride in her voice that Julian felt a lump in his throat. When they reached the lake, Tessa sat on the edge and started throwing little stones into the water, laughing every time she made ripples. Julian and Grace stood side by side. You know what's funny? Julian said quietly. I spend my whole life listening to people talk. Meetings, negotiations, business dinners, but no one ever really listens to me. No one cares what I think or feel. They only care about what I can do for them. Grace turned her head toward him. And now? Now I feel like someone is listening to me, Julian said. You. And it's strange because we barely know each other, but it's more real than any conversation I've had in the last 10 years. Grace didn't answer right away. She kept looking at Tessa. Then she said, I hear you, Julian, and you can come back here whenever you want. Julian smiled. I'll be back. And he did come back. The next Saturday. And the one after that. And the one after that. It became a routine. Every week, Julian showed up at the park. He always brought something small, a children's book, a package of cookies, a balloon, nothing extravagant, just simple gestures, and slowly, he learned more about Grace and Tessa. He learned that Grace worked night shifts at a diner far away, taking 2 buses to get there. He learned that an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martha, looked after Tessa during that time. He learned that Grace loved to read, but rarely had the time. He learned that Tessa dreamed of having a dog named Max, and Grace also learned things about Julian. She learned he lived alone in a house that was too big. She learned he had nightmares about his childhood. She learned he'd never had real friends. She learned he couldn't cook, couldn't fix anything, but knew everything about numbers and almost nothing about people. And slowly, something changed. Julian started to smile more. He started to speak more openly. He started to feel less alone, and Grace started to trust, not completely, but enough to let him into the small, precious world she had built. Because, for the first time, Julian wasn't a function. He wasn't the rich consultant. He wasn't the neglected son. He was just Julian, and that was enough. The weeks went by, and the Saturdays in the park became more than just a routine. They became a necessity. Julian couldn't quite explain it, but he started to realize that these meetings were what he looked forward to most throughout the week. The endless meetings, the bottomless reports, the tense negotiations, it all seemed more bearable because he knew that on Saturday he would be there in that park with Grace and Tessa, and every week he brought something. At first, they were simple things. A storybook with colorful illustrations that he'd seen in a shop window and immediately thought of Tessa. She opened it with shining eyes and asked Grace to read it right away. Julian sat beside them on the bench and listened as Grace brought the characters to life with different voices, making Tessa laugh and clap with delight. The following week, it was a jigsaw puzzle of forest animals. Tessa insisted that Julian assemble it with her on the grass, and the two of them spent almost an hour and a half fitting the pieces together, while Grace watched with a discreet but genuine smile. Then came a set of colored pencils, the good kind bound with 12 vibrant colors, and a drawing pad with thick pages. Tessa drew the park, the fountain, Teddy sitting on the bench next to her mum. Julian tucked one of the drawings into his wallet without her seeing, folding it carefully so it wouldn't get creased. "You don't have to bring something every time," Grace said one afternoon, as Tessa played near the lake, throwing breadcrumbs to the ducks. Julian looked at her, trying to understand if it was a criticism or just an observation. "I know," he replied honestly, "but I want to." "Why?" He thought carefully before answering. "Because it makes me feel good. Seeing her smile when she opens something new. Seeing you relax a little, even if it's just for a few minutes. It makes me feel like I'm doing something that really matters, something real." Grace watched him for a long moment, those bright eyes studying his face as if searching for hidden lies. "You matter, Julian," she said finally, her voice firm but gentle. "Even without bringing anything, just by being here, by showing up, by staying." "You know that, right?" He didn't know what to say. His throat tightened in an unexpected way. He just nodded, feeling something warm deep in his chest. The meetings gained depth as the weeks passed. They were no longer just polite conversations or simple games with Tessa. They were real, vulnerable, honest exchanges. Grace told him about the double shift she sometimes had to work when the diner was short-staffed. About how Mrs. Martha was a true blessing, but was getting older and more tired, and Grace worried about how much longer she could count on her. About how Tessa would ask when they would have a real house, with a yard where she could play and maybe have that dog she dreamed of. "I tell her we will someday," Grace said, looking at her daughter with a soft expression. "I don't know when, I don't know how, but we will. I have to believe that." Julian told her about the meetings where he was just a number, a signature on contracts, a voice repeating analyses that didn't matter to anyone. About how he spent entire weekends alone in that huge, silent house, walking from room to room without purpose. About how he was finally starting to realize he was living the life his father had planned, not the life he would have chosen for himself. "So change it," Grace said, simple and direct as always. "It's not that easy." "I didn't say it was easy. I said to change it. Those are different things." And she was right, as she always seemed to be. Julian began to notice small details that might have gone unnoticed before, the way Grace always shared her snack with Tessa before eating anything herself, making sure her daughter ate first and better. The way she mended the girls' worn-out sneakers with a needle and thread when the stitching started to give way, making them last another month, then 2. The way Tessa looked at her mother as if she were the most incredible, strong and brave person in the entire world. And she was. One afternoon, under a cloudless blue sky, Julian brought a different book. It was an old edition of fairy tales he had found in a used bookstore downtown. The cover was worn and faded with time, but the illustrations inside were beautiful, delicate and hand-drawn. "My mother used to read this book to me when I was a child," he said, handing it to Grace carefully. "I thought Tessa would like it. The stories are beautiful." Grace took the book with both hands, as if it were something extremely precious and fragile. "Are you sure? It seems very important to you." "It is important," Julian said, meeting her eyes. "That's why I want her to have it. I want it to be a part of your story, too." Grace looked at him for a long moment, and there was something different in her gaze, something that seemed like deep gratitude, but was also more than that. It was recognition, acceptance. Maybe even the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. "Thank you," she said, so quietly it was almost a whisper. Julian smiled, feeling his heart beat faster. "Thank you for letting me be a part of all this." The afternoons in the park began to stretch longer and longer. Julian started arriving earlier, sometimes right after lunch. Grace started staying later until the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink. Tessa invented elaborate games that included all three of them: hide and seek among the old trees, races to the fountain with an imaginary prize, collaborative stories where each contributed a part, and the narrative went to completely unexpected and funny places. "You're funny, Julian," Tessa said one day, hanging upside down from the bench while he carefully held her legs so she wouldn't fall and get hurt. "Funny how?" he asked, curious. "Funny like nice, like good. You make Mommy smile more than she used to." Julian looked at Grace, who was pretending to read her book but was clearly listening to every word of the conversation. "Do I?" he asked, trying not to smile too much. "Yes, you do," Tessa confirmed with all the seriousness a 5-year-old can muster. Before, she only smiled at me. Now she smiles more. A different kind of smile. I like it a lot. Grace slowly lowered the book, and her bright eyes met Julian's. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. Her gaze communicated everything: gratitude, recognition, maybe even a little fear of what it all meant. Julian began to realize, with growing clarity, that he didn't just want to visit this small but complete world that Grace and Tessa had built together with so much effort and love. He wanted to be a part of it, truly, deeply, permanently. He wanted to be there not just on sunny Saturdays, but whenever they needed someone. He wanted to be someone Tessa could trust without fear, someone Grace didn't always have to keep at a distance as a precaution, but he was afraid of getting too close, too fast. He was afraid of scaring them, of pressuring them, of seeming intrusive or opportunistic. He was afraid of ruining what was being built so carefully, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. So he just kept showing up. He kept bringing small surprises when he felt like it. He kept being present consistently, without pushing, without demanding anything in return, without expecting gratitude or recognition. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the distance between them naturally shrank. Grace began to share more details about herself, about her story, about how she was only 17 when she found out she was pregnant, still in her last year of high school. About how Tessa's father, an 18-year-old boy she thought she loved, promised to stand by her but disappeared completely before the first ultrasound. About how her family told her she was ruining her life, throwing her future away because of a mistake. "But I didn't ruin anything," she said, watching Tessa draw on the grass, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me. The only truly good and pure thing. I don't regret a single thing." "You're amazing, Grace," Julian said, and it wasn't empty flattery or an automatic compliment. It was the absolute truth. Grace looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "I'm not amazing. I just do what any mother would do for her daughter." "No," Julian insisted, holding her gaze. "You do so much more than that. And you do it alone, without help, without a support system. That's not just being a mother, that's being extraordinary." Grace looked away, but Julian saw the small smile that touched her lips, saw the faint blush that rose on her cheeks. Julian also began to open up more, layer by layer. He told her about the nightmares he still had sometimes, usually on Thursday nights when exhaustion built up, about waking up alone at 3 a.m. in that huge house and feeling the almost physical weight of emptiness on his chest. He told her about how work was becoming harder and harder to bear, how he felt suffocated in that expensive suit, behind that mahogany desk. "Sometimes I just stand there looking out my office window and think, is this it? Is this how it's going to be until I'm old and die? Numbers and more numbers, meetings and more meetings, all without any real meaning." "So change it, Julian," Grace repeated once more, with infinite patience. "You have a choice. Not everyone has that luxury, but you do. Use it." He knew, deep down, that she was completely right, but change was always scary. especially when you've spent your whole life following a script someone else wrote. Then something happened that changed everything. Julian had to travel for work, a whole week in another city, meetings from morning till night, with no time to even breathe. He told Grace the Saturday before, feeling strangely guilty. "I have to travel next week. I won't be able to come on Saturday." Tessa's face fell with such disappointment that his heart ached. "But you always come." "I know, sweetie, but it's work. Boring adult stuff. I'll be back the Saturday after, I promise." "Do you really, really promise?" "I really, really promise." Tessa held out her pinky finger, serious. Then a pinky promise. Her pinky swear. Julian linked his finger with hers, touched by her innocent trust. Pinky swear, word of honor. The week that followed was absolutely horrible. The meetings were tedious and empty. The hotel was impersonal and cold. The food was tasteless. And Julian found himself thinking about the park the entire time. Thinking about Grace reading quietly on the bench. Thinking about Tessa laughing as she played with Teddy on the soft grass. He sent a text to Grace in the middle of the week, on a particularly lonely night. "How are you two?" The reply came a few hours later. "We're good. Tessa asked about you 3 times today. Said Teddy misses you a lot." Julian smiled to himself, looking at the cold screen of his phone, feeling something warm in his chest. "I miss you guys too, Teddy and both of you, a lot." When he finally returned, the following Saturday, Julian went straight from the airport to the park. He didn't even stop home to change clothes or drop off his things. He just threw his suitcase in the trunk of his car and drove as fast as the traffic allowed. It was almost 3 in the afternoon when he finally arrived. The sun was strong and warm. The park was full of families enjoying the beautiful day, and he searched anxiously with his eyes, his heart beating faster. And there they were, on the same bench as always. Grace reading, Tessa drawing with concentration. Julian started walking toward them, and it was Tessa who saw him first. "Julian!" she shouted, dropping her pencils and running with open arms. He quickly knelt, and she threw herself into his arms with such force and joy that he almost lost his balance and fell backward. "You came back." "You really came back?" "Of course I came back, sweetie. I promised, remember. I pinky swore." Tessa pulled away just enough to look into his face with those huge, bright blue eyes. "I made something special for you. Do you want to see?" "I'd love to," Julian said, already feeling the emotion welling up. She took his hand firmly and pulled him to where she had been drawing. Grace had stood up and was standing nearby, smiling in a way he had never seen before. "Hi," she said, and there was a different, warmer glint in her eyes. "Hi," Julian replied, meeting her gaze. "Did I missed you so much?" "We missed you too." Tessa quickly bent down and picked up a sheet of paper that was separate from the others. She held it out to Julian with her 2 small hands, as if it were something extremely valuable and important. "I made this for you while you were away." Julian took the paper carefully and looked at it. It was a drawing, made with the colored pencils he had given her, a little crooked in its proportions as children's drawings are, but full of touching and loving details. There were 3 clearly defined people: a blonde woman with long hair, a smaller blonde girl, and a man with dark hair. They were holding hands in front of what looked like the park, with the fountain in the background and some trees on the sides. Above them, written in big, colorful, rainbow-toned letters, was, "My new friend." Julian felt his throat tighten violently. His eyes burned, growing hot and moist. He knelt slowly in front of Tessa, holding the drawing with all the care in the world, as if it were the most precious thing he had ever touched. "Tessa." His voice came out choked, broken with emotion. "This is the best gift I have ever received in my entire life. The very best." "Really?" she asked, her eyes shining with joy. "Better than anything." "Better than anything," Julian repeated, and he wasn't exaggerating or being polite. It was the purest, most honest truth he had ever spoken. He hugged the little girl tightly but carefully, and she returned the hug with all the strength of her skinny arms around his neck, the scent of children's shampoo and grass in her golden hair. Grace was standing nearby, watching the scene in silence. When Julian looked up over Tessa's shoulder, he saw that her eyes were teary too, a hand over her chest. He stood up slowly, still holding the precious drawing, and looked at Grace intensely. "Thank you," he said, quietly but firmly, "for letting me be a part of this, for trusting me, for giving me this chance." Grace took a step forward, closing the distance between them even more. "You don't need to thank me for anything, Julian. You're a part of this because you chose to be here, because you showed up when you said you would, because you stayed when you could have left. And that means absolutely everything to us." Julian felt something settle definitively inside him, as if a piece that had been loose and floating his whole life had finally found its exact place, fitting perfectly. There, in that sunny park, with Tessa's drawing safe in his hands and Grace smiling by his side, Julian understood with absolute clarity. He had spent his entire life searching for something he couldn't name, desperately searching for a true connection, for a real sense of belonging, for a place where he could take off all the masks and just be himself, without judgment. And he had found it, not in a sleek glass and steel office, not in a huge empty house full of expensive furniture, not in important meetings or business dinners with expensive wine, but right there, on that simple wooden bench, worn by time and use, with two people who had entered his life completely by chance and changed absolutely everything. The bond was sealed for good, not with grand promises or dramatic movie-worthy declarations, but with constant presence, with daily choice, with respectful silence and deeply honest conversations, with shared books, saved drawings, and sunny afternoons invested together. "Can I keep this forever?" Julian asked, showing the drawing. "Of course," Tessa said, jumping up and down. "I made it for you. It's all yours now." Julian folded the paper with extreme care, making sure not to crease even a corner, and put it in his wallet, right where it would be protected and safe. "I will keep it for the rest of my life," he promised, looking into her eyes, and he would. Because that drawing wasn't just cheap paper and colored pencils, it was concrete proof that he mattered. That he had been seen, chosen, accepted exactly as he was. It was proof that finally, after searching for so long, he had found a place where he could truly stay, and he wasn't going anywhere. It was a Tuesday when Julian decided to stop by the park. It wasn't Saturday, it wasn't their usual day. But he had left a meeting early and, without much thought, almost on autopilot, he took the familiar route. Maybe they wouldn't be there, they probably wouldn't. But something inexplicable pulled him in that direction, as if he needed to check. When he walked through the iron gate, the sun was already starting to set on the horizon. The park was much emptier than on busy weekends, with just a few people walking their dogs, a runner or two with headphones on, and then he saw them. On the usual bench, Grace was sitting. But something was deeply wrong. Next to her, on the concrete ground, were two old, worn-out suitcases and a few plastic bags tied with tight knots. Tessa was sitting on top of one of the suitcases, hugging Teddy tightly, her face completely hidden in the bear's brown fur. Julian's heart began to race violently. He quickened his pace, almost running toward them, his work briefcase bumping against his leg. "Grace," she slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, but no tears were falling. Just a deep, heavy exhaustion, so dense it seemed almost physical, palpable. "Julian," she said, trying to smile but failing to make the full movement with her lips. "I didn't expect to see you today." "It's not Saturday." Julian looked at the worn suitcases, at the unnervingly quiet and withdrawn Tessa, at the barely disguised desperation on Grace's face, and he understood immediately. "What happened?" he asked, crouching down to her level. Grace took a deep breath, as if she needed to gather all her remaining strength to talk about it. "We were evicted this morning," she said, her voice controlled but fragile. "The owner of the apartment sold the whole building. He told us last week we had to be out by today, no exceptions. I tried to find another place, called everyone I knew, but—" She paused, her voice breaking for a second before she continued. "I couldn't in time. No one rents without a co-signer. I didn't have enough money for a deposit on any decent place. Julian felt something squeeze his chest so hard it was almost physically painful. "Where are you going to stay tonight?" Grace looked at the huddled Tessa, then at the pathetic suitcases holding everything they owned in the world. "I don't know yet exactly," she admitted, pride battling desperation in her voice. "I called Mrs. Martha, but she lives in a tiny studio apartment, barely big enough for herself. There's no room for us. I called a few shelters too. They all have waiting lists. So," she shrugged, trying to appear strong and in control, "we'll figure something out. We always do. We always have until now." But Julian saw through the facade. He saw the real fear hidden behind the forced dignity. He saw the absolute exhaustion behind the rehearsed strength. He saw a woman hanging on by a thread, but who flatly refused to break down in front of her young daughter. He knelt in front of Tessa, gently touching her shoulder. "Hi, sweetie." She slowly lifted her face from the bear. Her normally bright blue eyes were red, swollen from crying. "Hi, Julian," she said, her voice thin and shaky. "Listen to me. It's okay now. Everything is going to be okay, I promise you." He stood up and looked directly into Grace's eyes with absolute determination. "You're coming to my house." Now, Grace blinked, as if she hadn't understood. "What? Julian? What did you say?" "My house. You're going to stay there with me. I have 3 empty bedrooms, plenty of space everywhere. You are not sleeping in an overcrowded shelter or on the street. Not while I can help it. It's not going to happen." "Julian, I can't accept that," Grace said, standing up quickly. There was wounded pride in her voice, but also barely contained desperation just beneath the surface. "You've already done so much for us. I can't just invade your house, your life, like this. It's not fair to you." "You're not invading anything. I'm offering from my heart. Please accept." "But it's too much, Julian." "It's too much to ask." "Grace," Julian interrupted, gently but with absolute firmness. "Look at me. This isn't charity. It's not pity. It's a welcome. It's helping people I genuinely care about when they need help. If I were on the street, with nowhere to go, would you let me sleep outside? Would you?" Grace opened her mouth to answer, then closed it without a sound. She looked at Tessa, who was watching them with wide, hopeful eyes, clutching Teddy to her chest. "No," she finally admitted, so quietly it was almost a whisper. "I would never." "Then accept my help, please. For both of you. Let me do this." Grace closed her eyes for a long moment, appearing to fight a fierce internal battle. When she opened them again, there was something different there. Weary surrender, deep relief, maybe even genuine gratitude mixed with shame. "Okay," she said, her voice weak and broken. "But only until I can find another place. I'll look every day. It's just temporary, Julian." "A few weeks at most. Stay as long as you need," Julian said, feeling something resolve and click into place inside him. "No rush at all. I'll go get the car now. Wait here for just a minute." 15 minutes later, he drove back. He opened the trunk and carefully placed the suitcases and bags inside, as if they were precious luggage, while Grace held Tessa's hand tightly. The girl was too quiet, scared and confused, but she clung to the bear as if it were a safety anchor. During the drive to the house, no one spoke much. The silence in the car was heavy but not uncomfortable. Grace stared out the window without really seeing anything, her jaw tense with worry. Tessa dozed off in the back seat, her head resting on Teddy, emotionally exhausted. When they arrived at their final destination, Julian opened the electronic gate, revealing a large 2-story modern house, well-maintained, with a sprawling front garden full of green grass and a few trees. Grace looked at the imposing structure with wide, unsurprised eyes. "Julian, this is too big. It's too much." "It's too big for one person to live in alone," he said, taking the suitcases from the trunk. "It's always been too empty. Let's go inside." He opened the front door with his key and turned on the entryway lights. The house was truly beautiful, tastefully decorated, with clearly expensive furniture. Everything very organized and clean, but it was devoid of real life. Silent as a tomb. Cold and soulless, despite all the expensive furniture and well-painted walls. Tessa held her mother's hand tightly, looking around with big eyes. "You can choose any room upstairs," Julian said, carrying the heavy suitcases up the wooden staircase. "This one is the largest. It has a full private bathroom. It's very spacious and comfortable. I think it will be perfect for you two." He opened the door to a truly large room, with a queen-sized bed covered in clean white sheets, a large dark wood wardrobe, a dresser, and wide windows overlooking the backyard garden. Everything was impeccably clean and organized, but clearly unused for a long time. Grace walked slowly into the room, looking around as if she couldn't believe it was real. "It's too perfect," she said, her voice thick with restrained emotion. "Julian, this is—" "I'll let you two get settled in," Julian said, placing the suitcases carefully on the floor near the wardrobe. "Take a shower, rest, use whatever you need. Anything you need, any questions, just call me. The kitchen is yours too, the whole house is. Please, make yourselves completely at home." "Julian," Grace turned to face him completely, her eyes shining with moisture. "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. I don't even know how to begin to thank you for this." "You don't need to thank me for anything," he said sincerely. "Just stay, rest well. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." He left the room, closing the door gently behind him, giving them their privacy. That night, Julian barely slept a wink. He lay in his own bed across the hall, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the small sounds in the house that were normally never there. Water running in the bathroom next door, light footsteps on the wooden floor, muffled female voices talking quietly. For the first time in countless years, the house wasn't steeped in absolute, oppressive silence. And it was surprisingly good, comforting. In the days that followed, something in the house's dynamic changed completely. The building began to come to life. Early in the morning, Julian would wake up to the wonderful smell of fresh coffee that Grace insisted on making in the kitchen. She made it very clear that she would not accept charity passively, so she started preparing breakfast for the three of them every day. Nothing too elaborate or sophisticated, but made with genuine care and affection. Tessa would spread her colorful drawings across the large living room table, while Grace searched for job opportunities on the old laptop Julian had lent her. The girl would hum made-up melodies under her breath, and the sweet sound filled all the empty, silent spaces of the immense house. "I got an interview," Grace announced excitedly on the third day, looking at the computer screen with clear hope shining in her eyes. "It's at a coffee shop downtown. Full afternoon shift. They say it pays much better than the old diner." "That's great, Grace," Julian said, genuinely happy for her. "I'm sure you'll get it. If I get this job, I can start saving some serious money to rent a new place for us," she planned aloud. "Maybe in 2 months, 3 at most, I'll have enough saved up." Julian felt an uncomfortable tightness in his chest at that prospect, but just nodded in silence. Grace kept their room absolutely spotless at all times. She made the bed neatly every morning, folded and organized the few clothes they had with extreme care in the wardrobe. She patiently helped Tessa with educational activities, teaching basic letters and numbers at the kitchen table using old notebooks. Julian would come home from work in the late afternoon and find the house completely different. There was a forgotten rag doll on the living room sofa, a new drawing by Tessa stuck to the refrigerator door with a colorful magnet. Small pink shoes by the front door, the sound of the TV on a cartoon channel, voices, laughter, life, and real, meaningful conversations. "How was your day at work?" Grace would ask every night, serving a simple but delicious dinner she insisted on making as a thank you. "Exhausting as always," Julian would admit honestly. "But it's so much better coming home here now." Tessa would always excitedly show him the new drawings she had made during the day. Julian praised each one with genuine attention, analyzing the colors and shapes, and she would smile, big and proud. At night, after Tessa went to sleep, he would work a bit on his laptop in the living room. But now he could hear Grace reading stories softly to Tessa in their room. The gentle, melodious voice easily carried through the not-so-thick wall, and Julian would find himself stopping his work to listen to the words, the caring tone, the occasional crystal-clear laugh of the little girl responding. One particularly quiet night, Tessa woke up startled from a bad nightmare. Julian woke up instantly at the sound of loud crying, and without a second thought or hesitation, he got out of bed and went quickly to their room. He knocked lightly on the wooden door. "Is everything okay in there? Can I help?" Grace opened the door slowly, with Tessa in her arms clinging to her, her tear-stained face hidden in her mother's shoulder. "Their bad nightmare," Grace explained in a low voice, looking exhausted as well. "I'm so sorry if we woke you with the noise." "It's no problem at all," Julian said immediately. He looked at Tessa with concern. "Do you want a glass of warm milk, sweetie? My mom always used to make that for me when I had nightmares as a kid." It helped a lot. Tessa lifted her wet face, her blue eyes red and swollen. "Yes, please," she said in a tearful voice. The three of them went down to the dark kitchen together. Julian turned on just the light over the stove and carefully heated some milk while Grace cradled Tessa comfortably in her lap, humming a soft, repetitive melody. The whole scene was so domestic, so natural and fluid, as if it had always been this way, as if they had always done this together. Tessa drank the warm milk in small sips, visibly calming down. "Thank you, Julian," she said sleepily, her eyes already half closed. "You're very nice." "You're welcome, sweetie." "Any time." When he finally returned to his own room, it took him a long time to fall asleep again, but it wasn't heavy anxiety or painful loneliness keeping him awake staring at the ceiling. It was the completely strange but wonderful feeling that for the first time in his adult life, that huge house finally felt like a real home. At the end of their first full week living together, Julian was sitting comfortably in the living room, focused on his laptop, when Tessa approached him slowly. "Julian, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Tessa. You always can," he said, immediately closing the laptop and giving her his full attention. "Do you like that we're living here?" "For real?" He felt his chest tighten at the innocent but loaded question. "I like it very much, more than you can imagine. Why do you ask?" "Because I heard Mommy talking on the phone," Tessa explained, fidgeting with her fingers nervously. "She said we need to leave here soon. That we're bothering you and getting in the way of your life." Julian felt a deep ache in his chest. "You are not bothering me at all, Tessa," he said with absolute firmness. "You can stay here as long as you need, as long as you want. There's no rush at all. Really." "You promise?" "I promise from the bottom of my heart." Tessa smiled in relief and threw herself into a spontaneous, tight hug. Julian hugged her back carefully, feeling her delicate lightness, the sweet scent of children's shampoo in her golden hair. When she excitedly returned to her drawings spread on the floor, Grace appeared at the living room doorway. She had been hiding and had heard the whole conversation. "Thank you for that," she said quietly, her voice heavy. "I was completely serious, Grace," Julian said, standing up and looking directly into her bright eyes. "You can stay here as long as you need. It's no trouble at all. In fact, it's good, very good. Having you two here is the best thing that's happened to this house in years." Grace blinked rapidly several times, as if she was struggling to hold back strong emotions. "I've never had this in my life," she admitted, her voice coming out weak and vulnerable. "Someone who genuinely wanted to help without asking for anything in return. Someone who didn't make me feel small, chaos inferior, chaos ashamed. For the first time since I can remember, I don't feel completely alone in the world." Julian took a step toward her, closing the distance. "You're not alone, Grace. Not anymore. Never again." She looked at him for a long, meaningful moment, and something intense passed between them. Deep understanding, genuine gratitude, real connection. That night, Julian lay awake again for hours, but this time he was thinking about everything that had changed. The house had been completely transformed. Before, it was just an empty physical space. 4 cold walls, soulless expensive furniture, oppressive and heavy silence. He would wake up automatically, go to work mechanically, come back tired, and sleep alone. The empty mechanical routine of someone who was technically alive but not truly living. Now, there was life pulsing in every corner. Tessa's loud laughter echoing excitedly down the stairs, Grace humming softly as she organized the kitchen or folded clothes. Genuine conversations about the day over dinner at the table. Small, friendly arguments about which movie to watch together. Creative, colorful drawings stuck absolutely everywhere possible. The house was finally breathing. It had a soul. And Julian realized, with a clarity so intense it was almost painful, that their presence filled a gigantic void he had carried his whole life but had never been able to properly name. It wasn't just superficial companionship. It wasn't just having people around to occupy space. It was truly belonging to something. It was genuinely mattering to someone. It was having people waiting for you when you came home tired. It was being an essential part of something much bigger and more important than yourself. It was family. Not the cold, distant family he'd had in childhood, obligatory, silent, empty, but the family he had finally chosen with his heart, and that had chosen him back. He looked up at the dark ceiling of his room for a long time and smiled to himself in the dark. For the first time in his entire adult life, Julian Hart felt genuinely at home. For real. It was Sunday morning when the doorbell rang. Julian was in the kitchen with Grace and Tessa, the three of them having breakfast together. Pancakes Grace had made, orange juice, light conversation about what to do with the rest of the day. The house smelled good. It was warm, alive. The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Julian frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. "I'll be right back," he said, getting up from his chair. When he opened the door, he felt his stomach clench. His father was standing there, Robert Hart. Impeccable suit, even on a Sunday. Erect posture, stern expression, the same cold eyes Julian remembered from his childhood. "Dad," Julian said, trying to hide his surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Robert replied, walking in uninvited. "We haven't spoken in months. You barely even answer my calls." Julian closed the door, his discomfort growing. "I've been busy." Robert looked around the living room with a critical eye. He saw Tessa's drawings stuck to the wall, the forgotten doll on the sofa, the small shoes near the stairs. "I see you have company," he said, his tone laden with disapproval. Before Julian could respond, Tessa came running from the kitchen, stopping when she saw the strange man. "Julian, Mommy wants to know if you—" She stopped mid-sentence, intimidated by Robert's cold gaze. Grace appeared right behind her, drying her hands on a dish towel. She read the situation immediately. "Tessa, come here," she said softly, taking her daughter's hand. "Hi," Grace greeted Robert politely, but kept her distance. "Sorry to interrupt." Robert looked at them both with an expression that made his opinion clear. He said nothing, he just turned to Julian. "Can we talk in private?" Julian looked at Grace. She gave a slight nod and led Tessa back to the kitchen. When they were alone, Robert crossed his arms. "Who are they?" "Grace and Tessa," Julian replied, keeping his voice calm. "They're staying here temporarily." "Temporarily," Robert repeated, the skepticism evident. "Julian, you barely know these people, and now you're sheltering two strangers in your house. Have you thought about the risks? They aren't strangers." "Yes, they are. What do you know about them? Where did they come from? What do they want from you?" Julian felt irritation begin to simmer. "They don't want anything. They needed help, and I offered it." "Help?" Robert let out a dry laugh. "Julian, you've always been naive." This woman clearly saw an opportunity. A single man with money, emotionally needy. It's the perfect target. "It's not like that." "No? Then explain it to me. Why are you doing this? For charity? Out of pity? Or because you're so desperate for company you'll take in anyone?" The words cut deep, but Julian didn't back down. "I'm doing it because they're important to me, because I care about them." Robert shook his head in disapproval. "You're making a mistake. Getting emotionally involved with people who are not part of your world. It will only hurt you in the end." "And what is my world, Dad?" Julian asked, his voice rising a notch. "Empty offices? Meaningless meetings?" "A huge house where I've lived alone for years. Is that the world you built for me? I built a life of success for you, opportunities, stability. You built loneliness," Julian cut in. "You gave me everything except what really mattered." Robert stiffened. I did the best I could after your mother died. I raised you, educated you, paid for the best schools, but you were never present. You never listened. You never wanted to know what I thought or felt. I was just another obligation on your list. I had responsibilities. Work. I couldn't just stop everything to be my father, Julian completed, his voice firm. And that's exactly what's wrong. There was a heavy silence. Robert glanced toward the kitchen from where the muffled sounds of Grace talking quietly with Tessa could be heard. You're throwing your life away for these two. You'll regret it. And it was in that moment that something inside Julian broke, not with explosive anger, but with absolute clarity. No, Dad, he said, his voice firmer than ever. For the first time, I'm building a real life, and they have given me more love, more real connection in a few months than you have in my entire life. Robert blinked, as if he'd been slapped. How dare you? It's the truth, Julian continued, not backing down. Tessa hugs me when I come home. Grace asks how my day was and actually cares about the answer. They laugh with me, talk to me, make me feel like I matter. You never did any of that. Ever. Julian, you're being irrational, too emotional. No, I'm being honest for the first time, and the truth is you never really loved me. I was a duty, a responsibility, but I was never your son in your heart. Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, he seemed speechless. Julian walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave. Julian, please, go. Robert looked at his son for a long moment. There was something in his eyes, perhaps regret, perhaps just wounded pride. It was hard to say. He walked to the door, stopping beside Julian. You'll regret this, he said quietly. No, Julian replied, looking directly into his father's cold eyes. The only regret I have is not doing this years ago. Robert left without another word. Julian closed the door slowly. He leaned his forehead against the wood for a moment, taking a deep breath. And with that door closed, something inside him closed as well. An old cycle, a pattern of seeking approval that would never come, of waiting for love from someone who never knew how to give it. He turned and saw Grace standing in the hallway, Tessa holding her hand. Are you okay? Grace asked softly. Julian looked at them both. At Grace, who had opened up her life to him even though she had every reason to be suspicious. At Tessa, who had chosen him as a friend, as family. And he smiled. I am, he said, and it was true. Everything's okay now. Tessa let go of her mother's hand and ran to him, hugging his waist. I like you, Julian. A lot. He knelt and hugged the little girl, feeling her sweet weight, the scent of children's shampoo. I like you a lot too, sweetie. Grace approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. Thank you, she said quietly, for choosing to stay, for choosing us. Julian looked at her, at Tessa between them, and felt something he had never felt before in that house, in that life, wholeness. For the first time, Julian Hart wasn't just existing, he was home, for real. 3 weeks had passed since the day Robert showed up at the door. 3 weeks of routine, of shared life, of moments that felt so natural it was hard to remember how things were before. Julian would come home from work every day and find the house full of life. Tessa always ran to hug him. Grace always asked about his day while they prepared dinner together. The evenings were filled with drawings, stories, conversations in the living room. But there was something growing inside Julian, a certainty that was getting stronger each day, and he knew he needed to talk about it. It was Friday night. Tessa had just fallen asleep after Grace read 3 stories in a row. Julian waited in the living room, his heart beating faster than usual. When Grace came downstairs, she found him sitting on the sofa, his hands clasped, clearly nervous. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside him. Julian took a deep breath. I need to talk to you about something important. The serious tone made Grace sit up straight, a shadow of concern crossing her face. What is it? Did we do something wrong? Are we being too much trouble? No, Julian said quickly. It's nothing like that. In fact, it's the opposite. He turned his body to face her completely. Grace, These last few weeks have been the best of my life. Having you two here, being part of your routine, being included. It's changed everything for me. So it's changed who I am. Grace smiled, but there was still caution in her eyes. It's been good for us too. Very good. You've been amazing with her. With both of us. Julian nodded, gathering his courage. That's why I need to ask you something. And you can say no, you have every right. But I need to say it because it's what I truly feel. Julian, you're scaring me. What is it? He took her hands, soft but calloused from so much work. I want to adopt Tessa as my daughter. The silence that followed was heavy. Grace pulled her hands back, her eyes wide. What? I want to be her father, legally, officially. I want her to have my name. I want her to know she has someone who will always be here, who will never abandon her. Grace stood up abruptly, walking to the window, her back to him. Julian, you don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do, he said, standing up too. I know exactly what I'm asking. No, you don't. Grace turned, and there were tears in her eyes now. You can't just walk into her life and make promises. What if you change your mind? What if you get tired of it? What if you meet someone and decide you don't want this responsibility anymore? That's not going to happen. You can't guarantee that. Her voice came out loud, broken. I've heard those promises before, Julian. Her father promised to stay. He promised it would be different, and he vanished, just disappeared as if we never existed. Julian took a step toward her. I'm not him, Grace. I know you're not, she said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. But I've learned not to count on anyone. I've learned that the only person who will always be here is me, and that's okay. I accept that. But I can't let her go through what I went through. I can't let her get attached and then be destroyed when you leave. I'm not leaving, Julian said firmly. Grace, look at me. She looked, her green eyes shining with moisture. I don't want to take up space in your lives. I don't want to replace anyone or change who you are. I want to walk with you, beside you. I want to be here on the good days and the bad. I want to be someone Tessa can trust, someone you can trust. Julian, you've made me better, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. You've made me feel things I never felt. You gave me a purpose I never had. For the first time in my life, I wake up happy. I come home and I want to be here. And it's not because you need me. It's because I need you. Because you complete me in a way I never knew was possible. Grace covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. How can I believe that? How can I trust you? Julian approached slowly, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Because I'm here. Because I showed up every Saturday even when I didn't have to. Because I opened my home when you had nowhere to go. Because I stood up to my father and chose you. Because every day I choose to stay, and I will keep choosing, every day, Grace, for all the days of my life. She took her hands from her face, looking at him through her tears. Dighton, and what if I truly let you in and you change your mind? I won't change, Julian said, his voice firm but gentle. I promise you, with everything that I am, I want to stay. I want to be her father. I want to be a real family. Grace studied him for a long moment, searching for lies, searching for signs that this was temporary, conditional. But all she saw was absolute sincerity. She will love you, Grace said, her voice faint. She already does. And if you break her heart, I won't, Julian promised. I swear to you, Grace, I will protect that heart with my life. Grace closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them, there was a decision there. So okay, she said, so quietly it was almost a whisper. Okay, you can ask her. Are you sure? She nodded, wiping her face. I am, because for the first time in my life, I feel safe, truly. And that's because of you. Julian pulled her into a tight hug. Grace allowed herself to relax, allowed herself to trust, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. The next day was Saturday, sunny and warm. Julian woke up with his stomach in knots from nervousness. Today was the day. He was going to ask. After breakfast, Grace took Tessa to play in the garden while Julian gathered his thoughts. He watched them from the window, Grace pushing Tessa on the swing he'd installed in the tree last week, the girl's crystal-clear laughter echoing through the air. Grace looked toward the house and gave a discreet nod. It was time. Julian went outside, his heart pounding in his chest. "Tessa," he called, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure." She jumped off the swing and ran to him. Julian knelt on the grass to be at her level. Grace stood nearby, but gave them space. "Tessa, I wanted to ask you something very important." "Okay." She nodded, her blue eyes curious and attentive. "You know I like you very much, right?" "I know." "I like you very much too, Julian." He smiled, feeling his eyes burn. "And you know I like your mom very much too, and I love being here with you, being part of your lives." "We like that you're here," Tessa said seriously. "The house is happier now." Julian took a deep breath. "So, I wanted to know." His voice faltered. He tried again. "Tessa, would you let me be your dad?" She blinked, processing the words. "My real dad. For real. Officially. Forever. Forever and ever. You won't leave." "Never," Julian promised. His voice choked. "I will stay with you and your mom forever, if you want me to." Tessa looked at Grace, who had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Grace nodded encouragingly. Tessa looked back at Julian, and suddenly a huge smile spread across her face. "I've always wanted a dad," she said, her voice a mix of joy and emotion. "I always wished for one. Every night I wished for one." And then she threw herself into his arms with such force that Julian almost fell backward. He held her tight, burying his face in her blonde hair, letting the tears finally fall. "You'll be my real dad?" she asked against his shoulder, her voice muffled. "I will," Julian said, his voice broken. "If you want me to, I'll be your dad forever." "I do, I really, really do." Grace couldn't hold back. She knelt beside them and wrapped them both in a group hug. The three of them stayed there in the sunny garden, hugging, crying, and laughing at the same time. "Can I call you Dad?" Tessa asked when they finally pulled apart a little. Julian held her little face between his hands. "You can call me whatever you want, sweetie, whatever makes your heart happy." "Then I'll call you Dad," she decided. "Sad, because that's what you are." Julian looked at Grace over Tessa's head. She was smiling through her tears, her eyes shining in a way he had never seen. "Thank you," she said silently, just moving her lips. "Thank you," he mouthed back, because she had done the impossible. She had trusted. She had believed. She had opened her heart even after it had been broken. In that moment, there in the garden, with Tessa between them and the sun warming everything, Julian understood something profound. Family wasn't blood. It wasn't genetics or an inherited surname. Family was a choice. It was waking up every day and deciding to stay. It was opening the door when it would be easier to close it. It was trusting when everything told you not to. It was loving without guarantees, without contracts, without conditions. It was Grace accepting help even when she was afraid of being abandoned again. It was Tessa opening her arms without knowing if they would be there to catch her. It was Julian kneeling on the grass and promising something that would change his life forever. And it was all of them choosing together to build something new, something that didn't have a name yet, but was real, true, permanent. "Should we celebrate?" Tessa suggested, jumping excitedly. "Can we make pancakes?" Julian laughed through his tears. "We can do whatever you want, sweetie." "Then I want pancakes. And then can we watch a movie together?" The three of us, Grace repeated, smiling. "Our family." "Our family," Julian echoed, feeling his chest full of something he had never felt before. Belonging, wholeness, chosen love. They went into the house holding hands, Tessa in the middle, skipping between the two adults. Grace started getting out ingredients, while Tessa chatted excitedly about what movie to watch. Julian put on some quiet music, and the house filled with the sounds of life, laughter, and the future. And for the first time in his entire existence, Julian Hart wasn't just living. He was living with purpose, with love, with family. The family he chose. And that chose him back. 2 months had passed since Julian officially adopted Tessa. 2 months of paperwork, hearings, bureaucratic processes that finally culminated in a document that changed everything. Tessa Hart, her full name, now carried their story, the choice they made together. Their routine had settled in naturally. Julian continued to work, but now he left earlier when he could. Tessa was enrolled in a nearby school, where she made friends and brought home drawings every day. Grace took care of the house, but there was something different about her in recent weeks, something restless. It was Thursday night. Tessa was already asleep, and Julian was in the living room reviewing some work documents when Grace appeared at the door. She stood there for a moment, clearly gathering her courage. "Julian, can I talk to you?" He closed his laptop immediately. "Of course, always." "Sit here." Grace sat on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, nervous. "I need to tell you something. And I'm not sure how you're going to react." Julian felt a pang of concern. "You can tell me whatever it is." She took a deep breath. "I want to work, Julian." He blinked, confused. "But aren't you happy here? Did I do something wrong?" "No," Grace said quickly. "It's not that. You've been incredible, perfect even. And that's exactly why I need to do this." "I don't understand." Grace looked down at her hands, searching for the right words. "My whole life, I've depended on someone, on my parents until they kicked me out. Then I had to manage on my own, but always on a tightrope, always on the edge. And now I have stability. I have everything I need. But I'm not the one who built this. You gave it to me." "Grace, let me finish," she asked, holding up a hand. "Please." Julian nodded, giving her space. "I'm grateful, more than you can possibly imagine. But I don't want to just be grateful. I don't want to be the woman who lives in someone else's house, who depends on someone else's goodwill. Even if that someone is you, who has never made me feel less, I need to have something of my own. I need to build something with my own 2 hands. She finally looked at him, her green eyes determined. "I want to work. I want to have my own money. I want to be able to buy something for Tessa without depending on you. I want to contribute for real. I don't want to depend on anyone, not even you." The silence that followed was heavy. Julian watched her for a long moment. He saw the strength in those eyes, the dignity, the need to be more than the rescued woman, the sheltered mother. And then he smiled. "Did you think I would stop you?" Grace blinked, surprised. I thought you might be upset. Or think it's unnecessary, that I already have everything here." "Grace," Julian leaned forward, "I want to see you grow. I want to see you conquer your own spaces. I want to support, not control. You don't have to erase yourself to be here. You never did." "Really? Completely serious," he said firmly. "In fact, I think it's incredible that you want this. It shows who you really are, and who you are is someone strong, independent, amazing." Grace felt her eyes burn. "I was afraid of disappointing you, afraid you'd think I wasn't satisfied with what you've done for us." "You could never disappoint me by wanting to grow," Julian said, taking her hand. "What would disappoint me is if you felt trapped. If you hid who you are just to not bother me. You want to work? Then let's find the perfect job for you. You want to study? We'll figure it out. Whatever you need, Grace, I will support you. Always." A tear ran down her cheek. "Why are you like this?" "Like what?" "So. Right. So different from everyone else who has ever been in my life." Julian smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "Because I learned from you. I learned that true love doesn't trap. It sets you free. And I want to see you free, to be everything you can be." Grace threw herself into a hug, holding him tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding me. For not making me small." "Never," Julian promised. "You are giant, Grace, and I'll be here cheering for every step you take." When they pulled apart, Grace was smiling, not a shy or grateful smile. It was a confident smile, from someone who knew her worth and had permission to shine. "I already know what I want to do," she said, her eyes gleaming. Tell me. I want to work with children. In a daycare or a school. I've always loved it, and I think I'd be good at it." "You'd be perfect," Julian agreed without hesitation. Let's look together. Tomorrow, if you want. Grace nodded, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't just feel like a mother or someone who needed help. She felt like Grace, whole, capable, free. Because a supported woman is not a diminished woman, she is a woman free to fly. 3 weeks later, Grace had gotten the job, a teacher's aide at a preschool. It didn't pay much yet, but it was hers, earned on her own merit. Julian had never seen her so radiant. It was a Saturday morning, quiet and sunny. Julian was sitting in the living room, watching Tessa on the floor drawing with colored pencils scattered around her. She was quietly humming a song they had heard on the radio. Grace was on the sofa, finally having time to read the book she had started months ago. The house was in a comfortable silence, not the empty silence from before, but the silence full of presence, of life happening without a rush. Julian took a deep breath, feeling something warm and complete in his chest. "You know something," he said suddenly. Grace looked up from her book. Tessa stopped drawing. "What?" Grace asked. Julian smiled, looking at them both. "I was just thinking, remember the day I gave Tessa that bear? In the park, on her birthday." Tessa grinned widely. "Teddy, I remember." "I remember too," Grace said, closing her book and giving him her full attention. "That day," Julian continued, his voice growing softer, "I thought I was offering something. I thought I was doing a good deed, you know, giving a gift to a child." He paused, feeling the emotion rise. "But the truth is, I was the one who received the best gift. I was the one who was given something I didn't even know I needed so badly." "What?" Tessa asked, curious. Julian looked at her, then at Grace, his eyes shining. "A family." Grace covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes immediately filling with tears. "You two gave me something I never truly had," Julian said, his voice now choked. "You gave me belonging. You gave me unconditional love. You gave me laughter and conversations and hugs. You gave me a reason to wake up happy every day. You gave me a house that became a home. You gave everything." Tessa dropped her pencils and ran to him, climbing onto the sofa and hugging his neck. "You gave us everything too, Dad," she said, and that word still made his heart skip a beat every time. Grace stood up and came to sit on the other side, completing the hug. "The three of us together," she said softly. "Against everything, Julian repeated, and then Tessa pulled away, jumping off the sofa with renewed energy. She opened her arms wide and shouted with all her might, "The Hart family, together forever." The phrase echoed through the house, and Julian and Grace burst into genuine, warm laughter. "The Hart family, together forever," Grace repeated, laughing. "Forever," Julian confirmed, pulling them both closer. They stayed like that for a while, huddled on the sofa, laughing about small things, planning lunch, deciding what movie to watch in the afternoon. No exaggerated or dramatic promises, no grand declarations, just truth, affection, daily choice. Because the most beautiful love isn't the kind that appears suddenly like in a movie. It's not the kind that comes ready-made, perfect, effortless. The most beautiful love is the kind that is built slowly. It's the kind that starts with a teddy bear in a park. It's the kind that grows with honest conversations and vulnerability. It's the kind that is strengthened when you choose to stay even when it would be easier to leave. It's the kind that is sealed when you open the door to your home and your heart. It's the kind that is completed when you let someone grow, fly, be free, and yet they still choose to come back to you every day. It's love built brick by brick, conversation by conversation, choice by choice. And that love, when it's finally complete, doesn't go away. It stays forever. Julian looked at Grace, who was smiling as Tessa showed her new drawing, the three of them together holding hands under a huge yellow sun. "It's us," Tessa explained proudly. "To the Hart family." "It's perfect," Julian said, and it was true, because they were perfect. Not in the sense of being flawless, but in the sense of being exactly what they needed to be for each other. Grace took Julian's hand and squeezed it lightly. "Thank you," she said, just moving her lips. "Thank you," he mouthed back. And there, on that calm Saturday morning, with Tessa drawing on the floor and Grace by his side, Julian understood that he had found what he had spent his entire life searching for. It wasn't in a promotion at work. It wasn't in a big, expensive house. It wasn't in the approval of other people. It was right there, in that room, with those two people. It was in chosen love. In a built family, in a home made with presence, not with walls. And for the first time in his entire life, Julian Hart was complete, totally, absolutely, perfectly complete. And he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was just the beginning of a life worth living, with the family he chose, and that chose him back, forever. If this story touched your heart, subscribe